99% of the conversations you have are entirely forgettable, and the brutal truth is, it is completely your fault. You walk into a room, you shake hands, you exchange names, and within 60 seconds, the person you are speaking with is secretly scanning the room for an escape route. You are not inherently boring. You are not physically repulsive, but you are actively committing a microscopic social crime that systematically shuts down the human brain. But here is the crazy part. There is a two-word psychological trigger that completely reverses this dynamic overnight. By the end of this masterclass, I am going to reveal a single conversational framework that flips a biological switch in the minds of strangers, turning you from a forgettable background character into the absolute magnetic center of any room. But to understand why this works, we first have to brutally dissect the massive mistake you make every single time you open your mouth. Society has completely lied to you about how to be polite. We are brainwashed from childhood to believe that if you want people to like you, you should ask them questions. So you ask about their job, you ask where they live, you ask how their weekend was. And this is exactly where 99% of people fail, because human beings do not want to be interviewed. They want to be understood. When you ask a generic question, you are not building a connection at all. You are assigning them homework. You are forcing their brain to fetch a pre-recorded, soul-crushing script they have recited 1,000 times before. Their eyes glaze over, their posture stiffens, and they mentally check out of the interaction. But the real problem runs much deeper than just being annoying or predictable. Every time you barrage someone with questions, you are accidentally triggering their nervous system's ancient threat response. Let us look at a fascinating piece of evolutionary biology that dictates every social interaction you will ever have. Dr. Stephen Porges developed something called the polyvagal theory, which proves our brains are constantly running a subconscious radar system known as neuroception. Your neuroception is scanning every person you meet, asking one primal, unavoidable question. Is this person safe, or are they a threat? When you aggressively seek data from someone, like an interrogator shining a bright spotlight in their face, their neuroception flags you as a social threat. They might smile and nod politely, but biologically, their body is preparing to flee the conversation. Let us take a deeper look into the neuroscience of why questions cause so much friction. In the human brain, there is a neural system called the default mode network. This network is heavily linked to self-criticism, anxiety, and overthinking. When you walk up to a stranger and ask, "What are your goals for this year?" or "Why did you choose that career?" you are forcefully activating their default mode network. You are demanding that they evaluate their own life choices on the spot and present a socially acceptable answer to you. This requires massive cognitive load. It is exhausting. They have to filter their truth, construct a narrative, and hope you approve of it. No wonder people physically cross their arms and lean away from you. Now flip the script completely. Imagine a guy named Julian. Julian goes to a crowded, high-stakes networking event filled with influential people. He has no rehearsed script, no fancy elevator pitch, and he barely asks a single question the entire night. Yet, within 10 minutes of arriving, a group of high-status individuals are huddled around him, laughing, completely captivated by his presence. What is Julian doing differently that makes him untouchable? He is not asking for their data. He is validating their existence. And this is the exact turning point where everything changes for you. Julian uses a technique rooted in advanced cold reading, utilizing two specific words: "You seem." This is the ultimate skeleton key to the human ego. Instead of asking someone what they do for a living, Julian looks at them, pauses for a second, and says, "You seem like someone who absolutely thrives in chaos." Instantly, the dynamic shatters into a million pieces. The other person stops reciting their boring social script. Their eyes widen. They physically lean in closer to him. Why does this happen? Because you just handed them the most intoxicating drug known to humanity, which is the feeling of being deeply and truly observed. But do not be fooled for a second. This is not just a cheap parlor trick or a clever pickup line. It is a literal biological hijack of the brain's reward system. When you make a targeted observation about someone's personality, their brain immediately releases a massive hit of dopamine. Harvard researchers have conclusively proved that talking about oneself activates the exact same neural reward pathways as eating chocolate or winning money. When you say you seem, you are not just making a casual statement. You are handing them a neurological reward on a silver platter. And this is the secret most people miss completely when trying to be charismatic. The reason asking questions fails is because it forces the other person to do all the heavy lifting in the conversation. But a calculated observation gives them a fascinating puzzle about their favorite topic in the universe, themselves. They physically cannot resist correcting you, agreeing with you, or desperately asking how you figured them out so quickly. But here is where it gets highly dangerous. If you use this psychological tool incorrectly, you will look incredibly creepy and instantly ruin your reputation. Most people hear this concept and immediately start throwing out lazy, generic compliments. They walk up to people and say, "You seem really nice," or "You seem like a fun person to be around." And this is where the entire strategy falls apart instantly. Generic observations do not make people feel seen at all. They make people feel managed and categorized, which feels manipulative. If you want this to work, your observation must be highly specific and slightly bold. It has to pierce straight through the superficial layer of small talk. For example, instead of saying you seem smart, you look them dead in the eye and say, "You seem like the kind of person who notices absolutely everything in a room, but strategically says very little." Boom. You have just struck a massive psychological chord. Even if you are slightly wrong in your assessment, the psychological hook is deeply set. They will instantly jump in to correct you, and in doing so, they will excitedly reveal their true, authentic self. This phenomenon is known as the Barnum effect on steroids, tailored specifically for high-level networking. You are offering a reflection of their identity that feels profoundly personal and rare. But we have to go even deeper into why this creates instant, unbreakable magnetism. True social power does not come from being the loudest or funniest person in the room. It comes from being the person who makes others feel the most alive. When you constantly ask questions, you are literally taking energy away from the interaction. You are demanding information without providing any value. When you make an insightful observation using "you seem," you are giving massive amounts of energy. You are gifting them your undivided, hyper-focused attention. In a modern world where absolutely everyone is completely obsessed with their own glowing phone screens and paralyzed by their own social anxieties, the absolute rarest commodity on earth is pure, undistracted focus. By simply observing someone and verbalizing that specific observation, you instantly elevate their social status. You prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are worthy of being intensely studied. And here is the most powerful psychological twist of all that makes this technique almost unfair. When you confidently tell someone who they seem to be, they will subconsciously bend their actual behavior to match your observation. If you look at a nervous, fidgety person and say, "You seem incredibly grounded and unshakable," their brain will frantically search for evidence to prove you right. They will literally calm down in real time just to match the frame you set for them. You are essentially hacking their self-perception from the outside in. You are not just reacting to their energy, you are actively shaping their reality. This is exactly why truly magnetic communicators always seem to have a reality distortion field around them. They never sit around waiting for people to show their best selves. They forcefully invite their best selves out through highly calculated, positive observations. Let us talk about the trap of negative observations. You might be thinking, what if I notice something bad? What if they seem tired or angry or nervous? Never, under any circumstances, verbalize a negative state using this framework. If you walk up to someone and say, "You seem really stressed out," you are not building a connection. You are inducing panic. You are making them hyper aware of their own flaws. The core philosophy of social magnetism is that you must always offer a high status interpretation of their behavior. If someone is being quiet and aloof, you do not say, "You seem shy." That is an insult disguised as an observation. Instead, you reframe their silence as a position of power. You say, "You seem like the kind of person who prefers to analyze a room before deciding who is actually worth talking to." Do you see the profound difference there? You took the exact same behavioral data, their silence, and you handed it back to them as a compliment about their intelligence and standards. You took their perceived weakness and transformed it into a psychological superpower. When you do this, they will feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude toward you. You become their social ally. Let us break down another visceral example of this concept in action to solidify it in your mind. Picture a high stakes first date at a nice coffee shop. A girl named Sarah sits across from a guy who immediately launches into the standard, exhausting resume review. Where did you go to school? How many siblings do you have? What are your hobbies? Sarah is physically sitting in the chair, but mentally, she has already checked out and is planning her escape route. The entire conversation is a sterile, lifeless transaction. Now, rewind the tape and watch the exact same date, but the guy uses the observation framework instead. Within the first 5 minutes, instead of interrogating her about her job, he notices how carefully she analyzes the menu choices, and he casually says, "You seem like someone who makes huge life decisions purely on gut instinct, but you pretend to be hyper analytical so people do not question you." Sarah's brain practically short circuits on the spot. She bursts out laughing, she drops her defensive posture entirely, and she spends the next 2 uninterrupted hours passionately explaining how her entire life operates exactly like that. The first guy tried to gather boring facts. The second guy ignited a massive emotional fire that bonded them instantly. But why is this so incredibly hard for most of us to do in real life? The ugly truth is, we are absolutely terrified of being wrong. We rely on boring, generic questions because they are perfectly safe. It is a primal evolutionary defense mechanism designed to avoid social rejection at all costs. If you ask a safe question, you cannot be judged for it. But if you make a bold, highly specific observation, you are putting your own social intuition on the chopping block. And this is exactly why the You Seem technique commands so much immediate respect from high-value people. It demonstrates supreme social courage. When you show that you are perfectly willing to risk being wrong just to connect with someone on a much deeper level, you project massive, undeniable confidence. You are actively signaling to their subconscious that you are not desperate for their approval or validation. You are simply curious about their existence as a human being. And paradoxically, that exact lack of desperation is precisely what makes you utterly irresistible to them. So how do you actually master this in the real world without overthinking it and freezing up? It requires a fundamental, permanent shift in how you process human beings. You have to stop passively listening to just their words and start actively reading the hidden subtext of their behavior. You must train your brain to look for the fascinating contradictions in people. You look for the person dressed in a highly intimidating, sharp suit, but who has a genuinely warm, slightly goofy laugh. You observe that exact contradiction and you boldly call it out. You seem like you have to play the tough, ruthless boss all day long, but you are secretly the biggest prankster in your inner friend group. When you hit that bullseye, the reaction is explosive. It feels like you have known them intimately for 10 years instead of 10 minutes. And this is where the elite communicators separate themselves from the amateurs. An amateur listens to respond. An elite communicator observes to unlock. But remember the massive mystery I promised to reveal at the very beginning of this video? The single, mind-bending truth you will learn that changes everything about how you interact with the world? Here it is, and it is going to shatter everything you thought you knew about confidence. The true, earth-shattering power of the You Seem technique is not actually about the other person at all. It is entirely about what it does to the physical structure of your own brain. Let me explain. When you fully commit to intensely observing people instead of frantically interrogating them, your own crippling social anxiety instantly evaporates. It vanishes. Why? Because you can no longer worry about what you are going to say next. Your entire mental focus is powerfully directed outward, away from your own ego. You are no longer trapped inside your own head, sweating and wondering if you look cool, or if they like you, or if you are saying the right words. You instantly transform into a social sniper. You become completely present in the moment, scanning the environment for subtle behavioral clues. This profound outward focus naturally and instantly relaxes your own nervous system. When your nervous system relaxes, you stop leaking anxious energy. You start actively broadcasting deep safety, warmth, and raw charisma to everyone in your immediate vicinity. You become incredibly magnetic simply because you are the only person in the entire room who is not obsessively worrying about themselves. You step into the role of the observer. You become the mirror, and human beings, driven by their endless ego and desire to be understood, will absolutely always gravitate toward the mirror that shows them their most fascinating, multidimensional reflection. This changes the entire game forever. Stop begging people to explain themselves to you through lazy questions. Start boldly telling them exactly what you see hiding beneath their surface. Master this, and I guarantee you will never have a boring, forgettable conversation for the rest of your life.